we always say we need to be talking about this more. If so and so would talk about it more, production or whatever. And I'm like, well, why don't we just talk about it more?
Yes, yeah, and I think there's a bit of a fear with the NDAs or with I think it's also like I still think it's quite a top-down industry, but probably like most industries, it really is that fear of ruffling feathers or speaking out or like or yeah, I think because I think this industry can be so insecure that you want the next job, want the next gig. And if this directive is not coming from the top, and it's very difficult then to like kind of go against the grain in that respect. So I think it's kind of but I think things are changing. I mean, and I think that is, and I think you kind of it takes those people at the coalface and the change makers to kind of be the ones that kind of, sometimes, make mistakes or, like make those changes. But I think everyone wants this to happen, and I'm doing postgraduate study at the moment part-time. And one of the things that the lecturer told me, or in his first lecture was, people think, we're at a tipping point. We're going towards a black hole, like event horizon. And so it's quite, I think the time factor is really important with this as well. It is a global thing. And I think, it will unite more than divide. And, that it's all so positive, but it's just, there's so much rhetoric as well that I think it's all that practical, granular, how do we make it happen? And how, so I can talk a lot.
Well, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, I agree in that. I mean, it's really interesting that your lecturer said that, because I feel like, what are we tipping toward? Like what's the when are we going to really feel the shift? And I think we don't know. And in some places, maybe we are, in other places we totally aren't. And like, is that across the board, net positive? I don't know. And so, it's interesting that it was described as, we're really moving toward a black hole, because it really is the black hole of, the unknown, like, change factor, culture shift factor. And, we keep saying, oh, we need to shift culture and that sort of thing, but nobody really knows quite what that is. Or, we know that, the identifiers are like certain behaviors. And then if everybody now starts to do that, then we've shifted culture, and maybe that's true, but like back of my mind, I'm always like, how much CO2 are we putting out there? Like, is this, making a dent globally? Like, what are we, like that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's really interesting. So like, how's it going? Just like broad strokes right now, like, how's it going for you right now in Australia in terms of sustainable production? Like how?
So I started in sustainable filmmaking in 2015, and that was on a big tentpole production at the Gold Coast, and it blew my mind. I absolutely loved working on it, and I had been working in film production over 10 years, and it is a fast-paced, temporal, tight budget kind of industry. It's, some people describe it almost like the circus, like the circus comes in. And so yes, I worked on one large feature, and then really hit the ground running. I learned so much, and I find I was working as an environmental steward, and I found it was really I went for it with an investigative mind, so really quite open to learning, asking questions, really kind of an educational thing, and also a trial, and connecting with community workers that are making really great inroads, but maybe don't have that exposure. So people who are really doing some cutting edge things, but at the preliminary stages, or they kind of want to do something, but they haven't had enough support. So it was really quite interesting. And we did establish, I was really proud, we established a industrial compost system for the first time as a trial. And it really helped the broader, like the businesses to see, how does this work? How much, compost are we talking for some sort of, film production or event that has, this amount of weeks and this amount of people. So it's those kind of things. And then the second production came, and it was another big feature. And I then had another person working with me, and it just got bigger and better. And and he had worked in the film industry a long time as a stuntman. So he just brought this stunt caliber to bin diving, and, kind of really rocking the, environmental element of it. So, and engaging with everyone. But he was fantastic. And so we just, the data that we had from the first one, it just tripled. So to what we diverted, and it was just really good. And, but then I found that the third big feature that was coming didn't have this role. So it was just so disappointing, because everything just went back. So there was this kind of movement forward, but then kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So, and I think it was a role that wasn't really established in Australia, and it still is sort of emerging. But I definitely think it's a way forward. And I then went to New Zealand and worked in New Zealand on another feature over there. And once again, it was, I found it was interesting. I found that some of the departments that were some of the hardest, they had maybe the biggest pushback. They were some of the best departments in New Zealand, just because of their attitude. So for me, it really established that a lot of this stuff is a cultural thing as well. So, and it was also different. I mean, I was quite concerned, thinking, oh my goodness, do they already have compost, so that I can just call a vendor and say, hey, can we have 50 compost bins? Can we, and yeah, they had a few. So a lot of they were quite advanced in some respect. And I think this is the other thing. It really does, when you're doing this work, it will depend on where you are in the world and how far ahead they are with their industry there and people on the ground working there. So, and this is where I think the film and TV industry, we do have, especially because we've got such a large platform, and, we're exposed. So it's important to kind of lead by example. And I also think, once again, it's that kind of putting it in our stories and putting it on screen as that kind of habitual cultural change, or introducing these new methods of living. But then you also need to back it up by walking the talk, of course, and making sure that the production is made as sustainable as possible. So yeah, and during this period, so it has been quite, I have been quite, I guess, a bit of an advocate to industry as well. So I think now they're really starting to look at this, and so that's quite exciting in Australia and I think New Zealand as well. So it's an exciting time, and certainly I think there's a lot more movement and push. So it is exciting.
Yeah. Well, I feel your pain in the 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of scenario, for sure. How do you think, I was just on a team meeting, and we talk about of everything, the keyword that stands out, because we keep saying it over and over and over again. And I'm now hearing it in other aspects of life, is integration, like how do we integrate sustainability into production? And so how does that resonate for you in terms of like, you know, going in, getting hired, going in, kind of that planning side, to, do you find that there's enough planning? Do you find that production, maybe could do more sort of, I just wrote this down too, sustainability scouting, just like they do for location scouting, because if you're going to New Zealand or any other country, or, like you are up against that kind of unknown in terms of that, but like, how do you think that all factors into the planning? Is there a rub there kind of from your perspective, or are productions doing that more?
I'm actually in talks with one production locally here, and to be honest, I just think it's incredible, because they haven't done this before, and they're so passionate about it, and it's quite interesting, because I think sometimes it can be an afterthought, a lot of this stuff. So for it to be really, and I think it's so important for it to really be planned. So you've got that, the planning, prepping stage, then the execution, and then the reporting. So in the production, and then the wrap. And definitely it is just that hitting the ground running as soon as possible in the initiation stage. So you really, it's almost like a recipe, like what you're doing, and everything's kind of organized, and so it will run smoothly, and so you have less hiccups along the way that you have to problem solve. So and I think it's also just that establishing what project this is, and the values of how seriously it's taken as well. I think that's quite important, just to for everyone to understand this, how seriously they're valuing this sustainability work, and asking, looking at vendors, and choosing vendors that kind of meet the same alliance and everything. So, and I think I really think it's important to take it all in a non-judgmental way, of course, and also really from a educational point of view. Like, a lot of this is a learning process, and I think it's also important to have it a continuation, so it just building up on the next project. So you may make a mistake on one, but that's okay. We've learned, and we'll make it better for the next. So it's really coming from that. It's let's take one step at a time, because I think it can be quite overwhelming as well. Like, where on earth do you start with this? Because it can be so big and also so minuscule, and it's also the bigger picture as well. Like, it's industry that's needing to change, and there's a lot of interesting information about the circular economy, and that's where I think it's really fascinating to look into that. And so it's but I think there's so much great stories to be told through this process in working out like finding your fate through this. And so it's a win-win, I think. So, but definitely in the you really need to hit the ground running, and it's almost like there's never enough to do. Like, there's always more to be doing. And so yeah, definitely the pre-production planning, and just that communication with everyone, just to make sure that everyone is okay, that this is the direction we want to go. So yeah,
two things you said kind of stood out. One is what I heard is perfection is not needed. You just need to action is needed, and we'll figure it out, but we're not going to aim for the perfect scenario. And then the second was fewer hiccups. Starting earlier means fewer hiccups later on, which I know for production, like that's one of the whole goals, is to have fewer hiccups in all departments with anything that, can be done. It's like, bring on extra stuff for the eventualities that, you're planning for those. And sustainability is one of those to be planned for. And if systems are set up early on, you have fewer hiccups and fewer probably annoying calls from the sustainability manager or whoever saying, hey, what about this? Like, I thought we were doing this,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It really, it's that, I think it is that important thing of especially when it's first established, because I talk a lot about the composting, because I love the 3-bin system as like just a basic thing on a green film, where you're really kind of getting everyone to look at their own impact, like their own waste, and having the color-coded system in place as well. So, and even with this kind of stuff, I mean, even in New Zealand, different councils had different colored bins. So in one council, like the compost bin was purple. In another one, often it's considered green, a green compost bin. But then, and recycling in Australia is yellow, whereas I think in America it's blue. So there's even those kind of things. You're trying to kind of make it as streamlined as so everyone kind of, and as easy as possible. And I think it's also one of those things where some of the other big things are the electricity and the petrol use, the petrol use as well. But I think that sorting system, having the compost, your recycling, and then your landfill, and then adding on to that, of course, but never having just one bin. You've got, at least 3 together. So, and then, educating everyone what goes in those bins, and having to find out exactly what types of plastics does that local recycling MRF accept. And if they don't accept certain plastics, stop putting it in, and, either stop purchasing it, or, find a different solution. And I think with recycling, there is such a mystery behind it. There's no real, at this stage, guarantee where it's going to end up and what is it getting made into. So yeah, it's that best reduce, refuse, reduce, recycle, in that order. But then making sure catering understand the difference between PLA plastics and and certified compostable. And I think because it's not a regulated system, I've come across a lot of products that aren't actually compostable, but they're actually marketed and sold as compostable. So no one would really know that unless they've kind of been, in a situation where they've purchased both compostable materials from the same vendor, but one's snapping and one's bending, and this one's beige and this one's white, and then just those kind of lessons learned that you learn. So but there's a lot of greenwashing out there, so it's really kind of that investigative approach, and really kind of following down the rabbit hole as much as possible. And it is exciting. I find a lot of the vendors and people that work in this space have been doing incredible things for decades and or longer. And there's a real support. And I know that there's a saying, rising sea lifts all ships. So it's really helping everyone kind of get there. So there's a real nice support element to it as well. So I might have gone off tangent a bit.
That's okay. That's okay. I mean, this is all part of it, because I mean, it's all like part of the ecosystem of production, right? And you're right. It's, the more we do and share the information, the better off the industry as a whole is. And I'm curious, like, how have you found the sort of planning and integration and thought behind other impact areas like fuel and electricity and like material reuse? Like how, like, is the infrastructure there? Are the options there? Or is that still kind of emerging?
I think it's still emerging in definitely in certain areas. I think even with hybrid cars in Australia, even in the Gold Coast, I mean, once upon a time, they were very difficult to even come about, but now I think there are definitely more. And at the moment, even with solar panels on studios, that's still something that, you know, some have not established yet. So there's still a long way to go with that. And so I think I can imagine there's going to be a bit of a scramble soon to get that stuff sorted and establish this kind of these things, and also the use of generators and other things like that. So there certainly is that cost factor. I mean, you know, Teslas are still quite expensive, or electric cars are still quite expensive. There's not that many. It's still quite expensive to purchase electric cars in Australia. But I think electric cars are the direction that we are headed. But in the meantime, hybrid cars, and then, you know, and I guess there is that the COVID element where there's kind of conflicting rules that, you know, with COVID, you're only meant to have a certain amount of people in a car, so then you need more cars. So it has been really challenging, and I think in certain respect, you just need to pick your battles and go with what you can, and do your best as well. And yeah, I think just hopefully there's more push to make this change faster as well. So I think it'll be quite rapid almost. I think there'll be quite an influx where, even with COVID, how rapidly that had to be implemented. And so I think then it may be similar to sustainability. Everyone is going to want to have this happen yesterday, which is good. So I think it's just, you know, definitely getting on board now, because you don't want to be left behind. And I think, you know, it is just starting. It's just that, like, even just a small step, and then, you know, building that momentum.
How do you think, or has it happened where production maybe asked for something, product or service, and, you know, maybe was denied at first or denied a second time or whatever, but then has kept asking? Has that kind of effort happened there yet? Or, and if so, like what was the shift?
Was it for certain things from the studios, or
could be a studio, could be production? I'm just curious if, like, the sort of leverage of the industry, so to speak, has, like, helped spur you know, new businesses, new jobs, new services towards, you know, for sustainability.
I think I don't like, I seriously, I do believe that you need someone on the ground. I think there's going to be, I see it as a new role in the industry. I think there could be and it's a scalable thing as well. So depending on the size of the production, you'll need a lot more people on the ground, especially in this, like, initial stage. So I mean, maybe in the future we won't even have, you know, departments, maybe, but definitely what I think is needed is someone on the ground, because there's a lot of guidelines and there's a lot of which is fantastic, but I think it's that actual, how do we implement this when everyone is so busy with their own work, and a lot of this stuff does take time and research to establish things. And the sustainable sector and even waste industry is constantly changing, because a lot of the waste materials are commodities. So one year it'll be worth $1,000 a ton, the next will be worth nothing. So it's a constant catching up with what's happening in your local area, rather than just that ticker box, putting out a bin and then, you know, hoping people use it. It's actually really kind of getting into more of a granular sense. So I think there will be a lot of I think there will be more jobs created with this, and to really kind of to help implement stuff and also bring it all together, because often experts in their departments, they're professionals and experts in their field, and they'll tell you what they're doing. And so it's just it's just bringing it all together. But I find if sometimes you don't have someone on the ground, you don't have someone reporting to head office saying, look, this actually isn't happening, or this is a problem, you need that weight from someone to kind of, put into that and say, we do need this to happen. It's coming from the top, and, this is what we want. And so if there is pushback by production saying, no, we don't have money for that or whatever, you can go to the higher ups or, the actual studio and say, look, this is some of the pushback I'm having. Where do you want to go? And so it's then, either having, putting more money into it, having a buffer, or, but kind of understand, like having that support there. So, and I think also even on the production, you might need just someone there as that go-to person. So if, you don't want to talk to that, you might have an issue in your department and you don't want to ruffle feathers. So you want to maybe go to someone to then make sure they can talk to that person. So it's just a bit of a kind of like a resource for everyone, but really, and I love that kind of work. And I think it also kind of, it's that kind of interconnection with different departments, because often they're so busy, they're not talking. So even with materials that one department might have cardboard boxes in excess that they're like, we don't have the space, we just want it out. It's like, that's great, this other department's wanting them and they were going to buy them, so let me muscle that and just take it away from you so it's gone. So it's that kind of integrated person that kind of networks and really kind of just, if there's a problem with one department, like I have in New Zealand, there was a problem with horse sacks, and so just things like that. And and horse manure, like if you've got so many horses and you've got so much manure, what are you going to do with that? And if you're in an area where everyone already has their manure, like where do you move like a ton of manure a week? So it's just kind of helping and doing extra research and adding, just labor and power, muscle, and really kind of linking different departments together.
How you mentioned earlier, kind of thinking about circular economy and that sort of thing. How is that playing out, or how is that?
This is really fascinating, and so one of my highlights was I met this guy. He's 80 years old now. Like he says he gets up and he's 17, and by the end of the day he's 80. He's a character, and his name's John DeBosey, and he works in Loganholme in the Gold Coast area. And he is just incredible. And what astounds me is the work that he's doing, it just seems to be under the radar so much. And he has he's astounding. So basically I was cold calling numbers from, I think it was a Planet Arc website, to see who could take polystyrene to recycle, because that's sometimes used quite a lot, and it's really difficult to recycle because of the air and all that. So I was having real trouble finding anyone who would take it, and he was one that was on the website list of people who would accept it, and sure enough, he said, yes, I can, I'll take it. And he turned it into, he used it as filler in different products that he was using. So he said, look, I've made these cement rocks. So they're kind of like a lightweight rocks that are used for cement, like filler, or, used to kind of enhance the strength of cement. This is made from your plastic, your polystyrene. And he made, I think he made like a panel, a plastic fence panel, so like a fence paling. And he said, this is really sturdy. This is made from 2 of your bags. So it was incredible. And he specializes in rubber tire, so tire waste. And he's been making biochar out of tires, but biochar that is mixed already with what's it called, the microbes, so it's soil ready. So this is really incredible groundbreaking stuff. And it just astounds me that it hasn't been picked up further. And the problem he's had is that if he can take the waste, but it's like he needs a buyer to start purchasing that back. So he's got a business case. So over years, he's been able to, basically do me a favor by taking bags of polystyrene that no one really in the area was taking, or if they were, it needed to be absolutely non-contaminated, and it would then be sent to China. So it was all offshore. He was onshore, and he had a small facility. So I connected with him in 2015, and to this day, like, I'm still trying to work with him to get him really off the ground, because the work he's doing is insane. And I think it just, especially with the circular economy thing, these things, it really needs to be addressed. So that's something I'm looking at, but it was incredible. But certainly he just said, for one production, he said, yes, I can take the waste, but I would need it purchased back. So just let them know what they want me to make it out of, and they can purchase it back. But unfortunately, it just didn't have, it didn't get to, the production, I think, was so fast. It didn't have the teeth or something, or they didn't pick it up. But that's certainly something I'm very keen about. And even talking with certain departments in New Zealand, they've already got certain businesses locally where they are literally taking their soft plastics in bulk and taking it to these local companies that are turning it into plastic fence panels. And I think that's something that is an easy mold and shape. So it's easy. It's a basic good thing to start. And of course, you need to make sure that it's a safe product to be selling, but this company is selling it in the equivalent of Bunnings in New Zealand, so it's available in shops. So it's really, it is really quite interesting, and I find there's a lot of work and talk being done in this space. So it's very exciting. But of course, I think people are so eager to release certain things. You want to make sure that you're not creating a problem further down the track. So your solution for now is not going to be a bigger problem later on. So you want to make sure what you're doing is legitimate as well. So but that's very interesting. That's it's so exciting.
I know. I am super interested in circular economy. I'm taking a class on it right now. I'm like, this concept of designing out waste so that we don't even, have that to contend with, is just fascinating. And I think its production poses a really interesting system to figure out how to design waste out of production, because there's so many different facets of production, and industries coming together and to make the whole thing go. And I find it to be quite an interesting challenge to think through.
Yeah. And I think that that's really, there's a lot in Brisbane. There's a nice entrepreneur hub, and but it's still establishing. I know there's the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that it's really, they've got some really interesting even I think online courses or networks or connections there, which is, it's really fascinating to see what people are doing. But once again, you need that time to be able to connect with the local industry in wherever you're filming, so that you can establish this research and relationship. So yeah, and then I mean, I don't know if it would be one day, but generating marketable, merchandise out of so-called material used in the film. So, and I think there's that shift from calling things waste, as it's now being talked about as a material or a resource. And so there's no such thing as waste. It's just that material misplaced or that resource misplaced. So, and I think it's that what I find, I still go back to that. I think the arts has such an important part of this, because it's looking at the world almost upside down, like really asking, what is this made out of? What is this really, kind of basic, boring thing? Or, where is it going to end up? What's the implication of that? So really questioning everything and looking at things in a whole different way, which I think the creatives are really good at in some respect, and coming up with solutions. So
I know, I feel like we could have a whole conversation just on that, because it's just so when you start to looking at different materials, it's so fascinating to kind of think through like what that process is and what happens or what could happen to that material. What would you find really helpful to accelerate your work? Like what is something that you constantly are like, if I just had this, or and it could be a broad thing, but like what would you find helpful?
I think I would like to see certain size productions have a mandatory position for someone on the ground. I think that is something, because otherwise I think I want to see more people doing this stuff. And so it can just be a part of the norm, because I think it's just so devastating when you've done all this amazing progress, but then it's just undone. And I just find it's undone unnecessarily. So I think making it like a requirement for this to be a part of productions. And I really think, especially to make it streamlined by having someone working on the ground, and then reporting to head office, and the director, and that's what I think is really important. I think in Australia we really don't have a system like the Albert system or the Green Production Guide or Green Spark. We don't have anything like that yet in Australia. I think there is definitely steps that is changing that. So I think there is momentum that's going to be changing soon. But in the meantime, I think that for me is really important, so that it's just a mandatory thing, that this is now a requirement. So progress is not undone, especially in this day and age. I think I find it actually a little bit hard to work on a production that doesn't have this now. And I think it just needs to be a mandatory thing, and it's a scalable thing, of course. So you might not need a big team. You might need a person, and maybe it might be a person part-time, but I think definitely you need a dedicated person to be really bringing it all together. I mean, the industry has so many dedicated expertise on different projects. I think it deserves someone who is, rather than it just being just like all the sustainability work just dispersed to different production people that, they don't have time, they might not have the know-how, and it just becomes a burden. So I think it really needs to be a mandatory thing to have qualified people working on the ground and reporting back, just so that there's a real reality check of what is actually going on the ground. That for me is something I really want to see. And I think that's important.
Agreed. Well, if nothing else, that is a key message to get out, that this sustainability is important to integrate, important to have somebody on the ground and figure out, do the research, help department heads with the planning of all of this, and finding those gems, like the guy that, recycled polystyrene.
John DeBosey, 80 years old, and he's such a character. But I really, he's the biochar out of rubber tires, and like he uses microwavable technology that it's just, and he's come up also with a solar powered water filtration system, and these are prototypes that he can show you, and I think it's not only for the film industry, it's for other industries as well, which it would be, I think, really important to actually follow through with this stuff. So, and in New Zealand, there was a really fantastic company. There were a lot actually, but they were just incredible great people doing things on the ground, especially during RAP. Eco Matters was one in New Zealand, which was just fantastic, and Habitat for Humanity as well, it's really important where people might just, and getting rid of that, we're time poor, we just need to get out of this facility, grab a landfill, skip in, let's just dump it, get rid of that mentality and call the environment department, or get contact that, and then they can just take it away and organize that so you don't have to worry. And it's really interesting how with Eco Matters, they were almost like a network in their community of different materials that companies didn't want. So it was basically available to whoever wanted it. So, and it was fascinating, even like, the plastic strap from pallet wraps or pallets, the plastic strapping. There was a woman making baskets out of it at a garden. So from like small things like that to larger scale, like industry composting, and it's really important and fascinating. But it's really kind of like looking at things. What is stuff made out of now, and where does it go, and looking at that circular economy, and I think the other thing is being carbon neutral is another thing that's coming about. So you really want to be reducing your footprint as much as possible anyway. So it's certainly exciting times, but it's important to keep that momentum. And I think we've got 9 years, or less than 9 years before 2030, which is quite a significant year. So, it's that time.
Yeah, the sense of urgency is really there, it seems like. And hopefully the industry at large, not just in the pockets of the world that seem to have, networks or organizations doing this stuff, but the industry at large will feel the sense of urgency as well. And obviously not everything will, or every practice will play out the same way on production. But what I find really interesting is that there's the way you're talking about this is the same way, we talk with, my team, or like I've heard other people talk about it. So it seems like this is all very, I mean, you're in Australia and you've got your own systems and the whole thing, but it seems like this is all very similar. And the problems that production are having or struggle with are all very, very similar. So it seems all very solvable. Do you agree?
I do agree. And I think a lot of this is kind of like cultural change. I mean, even I know with even with COVID times, unfortunately, there was like a snapback to a lot of single-use plastic bottles. Now, it's not for everyone, of course, but I didn't touch a plastic bottle because I just brought my 2 liters of water with me. And so I didn't have to rely on refilling or anything. So I think there's certain mentalities that people, I know I've heard that crew in New Zealand, they're just like, no, we refuse to have plastic. We're going to use compostable cups or something else, but we're not providing plastic. So there's, I think a lot of this stuff is a lot of cultural changing, and there are cost benefits, and I think it's actually becoming just more cost neutral or just more cost effective by being sustainable. And a lot of it has to do with that cultural habit change. I mean, if you had everyone, if everyone knew not to, put their Game Boy or batteries in a compost bin, which is something I've come across, you wouldn't have to have people spending time to make sure bins are contaminant free. So if everyone kind of understood the process, and it would just be more time efficient and then cost efficient as well. So
do you think we'll ever get to a ban on single-use plastic on set?
and
Cities are doing this, right? They're banning plastic or banning single-use plastic, or particular items in the landfill or whatnot. Do you think production would ever get to the point of like, you know what? No way. I mean, maybe your New Zealand folks are already kind of doing that with their plastic water bottles and whatnot, but like, it seems like it could be done. What do you think?
yeah, like just banning single use. I think so, absolutely. And there's even a company that's it's like a startup company called Green My Plate, and so they're actually a little team that they've branded reusable plates, and they're just going to festivals, and so if you easily having bins that you put your plates in this bin because it'll get washed in a dishwasher, and so it's just a shuffle around of, I think, roles and duties as well from certain departments. And I think even looking at slow food and, having, getting caterers that understand what foods are in season, locally sourced, and, even cultural foods, and putting them on the menu instead of kind of meals that maybe are just really kind of people are used to, but it's just changing it up a little bit. So, and I think that's the thing, it's kind of just being a bit innovative and creative, and even if it's just at, just like at little stages. So it's not just it's not too overwhelming, but just trialing different things, testing things out and seeing what people think. So there's not this big pushback. I think that's really cool. So yeah, but each department is so fascinating. I mean, it's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. So back to the perfection is not needed.
Yeah.
And if production wants to ban single use, they can. It's not like we have to wait for 10 productions to do it before it makes its way. Like somebody can, a production can do it.
It's kind of like change makers, we're kind of like the change makers, like changing the norm. And I mean, will it be like you bring your own reusable cutlery in your pocket, your own set of cutlery, your own drink bottles, your own coffee cups, so you've got everything yourself. And there was a story where one, I think it was a DOP or a head camera person, and he was one, like there's always little gems in every, like little green heroes or green gems, or heroes really. But he was like, no, I've got my own cutlery, and then the rest of the team by the end of the week they were doing the same. So it's that kind of and have fun with it as well. So but yeah, habit changing. So trend setting.
Yeah, because sustainability is cool and it's kind of here to stay. And we all need to get on with it because we have 9 years and let's go, right?
Exactly. And a sense of humor is definitely warranted. And I love hearing one of the things from one of the, I think it was one of the head riggers. I asked him, so, what, of course, the environmental people of the ward a week, weekly awards. And I said, so what have you done this week? And he said, well, I've been using my walkie-talkie, so I'm not yelling and cutting down on noise pollution. So just things like that. Like it's really fun to see how people, even small things, just to make those changes and but have fun with it along the way.
Yeah, that's really, really important. This is not a stodgy thing. It's like good for us, good for our health, good for the planet, good for, the bottom line, good for everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you for talking with me about this. It was fun to learn about how sustainability plays out in Australia and New Zealand.
Well, it's still, I think it's still growing, and I think people want it. And I think it's just, let's just start. And I think it is, it's an interesting space to be in, especially it's been over 6 years. It's been a very slow burn and it's been very frustrating. But I think it's just so exciting to start even getting contacted by production saying, how do we do this? And especially if it is a studio one, to have an actual role of someone on the ground. And I think that's really important. So I hope, fingers crossed, this just keeps happening and growing.
Mm-hmm. That's the point. Like, that's why, I wanted to talk with you. Hopefully we can help amplify the message and, get this out there and see, if it resonates with other people, if it resonates with studio folks, let's just get to the mandatory state and we'll all be working toward, common goals here. So.
Yeah, because I think that's that important thing, that it's not a question now, it's just, it has to happen. And like it has to come from the top, trickle down, the importance, the value, and this is the standard that we're going. If you're not willing to participate, you're off. There is that kind of, but no, it's certainly, I think that's important.
Awesome.